In this video, I'm going to talk about getting started in VisualBasic.net, and it's going to be very personal in tone. There's going to be no code examples, and there's going to be lots of slides and a lot of personal recommendations and thoughts based on questions that people have asked me over the last couple of weeks. First of all, I'd like to suggest that you can learn this on your own. I suspect that if you're watching this series of videos, and specifically this video, that you're not going to college to learn this. Your parents don't have expectations of you. You're on your own. Your company is not sponsoring you or any of the above. That was my situation back in 1993. I decided that I wanted to learn how to program. I had a degree in management information systems, but when I got out of school, I had absolutely no skills whatsoever. I knew a little bit about SQL, but they didn't make us work with any tools. I just had a lot of theory. And so I kind of floundered a couple of years until I finally found Visual Basic and spent every waking hour learning it. The second point I'd like to make is that you need many instructors. While I'd like to take sole credit for being the one that teaches you everything you need to know to build a successful development career, I'm realistic in knowing that you're going to need a lot of different resources in order to accomplish this journey. The videos can be helpful, but you're also going to need a couple of good books. You're going to need the actual tool itself or the tools that you choose to use. There's going to be magazines and websites and many other forms. Possibly you get an opportunity at some point to go to seminars or go to some week-long training, and those are all well and good. So you need instruction from a lot of different places. Also, you need lots of practice. When I was starting out, I spent literally every waking hour that I could in actually doing software development and teaching myself a little bit more about Visual Basic. That was nights, that was weekends, that was actually at work while I was in between jobs or in between appointments. I'd sit with my Visual Basic 3 book from Q Publishing and I'd read every single day. The other thing I'd like to point out is that you shouldn't have to spend a lot of money. There's a lot of good resources at your fingertips. Obviously, these videos are pretty inexpensive, but other things like reading the help. So many people just go directly for books when the help is so rich, and all the guys who wrote the books are pulling the stuff from the help in most cases. Now, there's other sites like MSDN and things that we'll talk about in just a moment that you need to have in your repertoire as well. But you don't have to buy a ton of books in order to become a good developer. And then also what I'd like to say is encourage you that it's going to take a long time to do this, and you're going to have to take a lot of baby steps along the way. You can't learn it overnight. But it is a great lifestyle. Once you get to the point where you understand how to develop software, even in this at this current time when I'm recording the video, the economy is a little bit depressed. The demand for software developers is not as great. There's a lot of people still looking in the job market, but I'm convinced that they're all going to find jobs eventually, and that they're going to fit into a good position because companies rely on technology to promote their business, to improve their business, to lower their costs, and so forth. And pretty much from my standpoint, I'm able to make a lot of money. My wife chooses not to work. She doesn't have to. I'm able to even work from home at times. And then there's also good entrepreneurial opportunities. Once you get into it, you can develop your own software on the side. You can do training like I'm doing right now. There's a wealth of opportunity out there for software developers. So the first question is, where do you start? It's really a catch-22 dilemma because what you need to know is the actual language that you're going to use to develop applications, but you really don't learn until you actually get in and start trying to accomplish something with the language. But how can you accomplish something like build an application if you don't know the language? So there's that catch-22. So what I'm going to suggest are a couple of steps that will help get you along the way and maybe give you a roadmap for the rest of your career. And it starts with step number 1, to start with the hello worlds. The help that comes with VisualStudio.net and the .NET framework has a lot of what they call walkthroughs, and we also have these walkthrough applications here in the videos at LearnVisualStudio.net. And I would recommend that you go through the beginning of each of the series, like the WinForm application series, the WebForm application series, and try to build a very simple WinForm application, very simple WebForm, very simple console application like we'll do in just a few moments, and just to get the basics and understand what can be done. So a lot of that work will be mindless copying exactly what the instructor in the book tells you or what I tell you to do and making it work and not really understanding what you did. The more you do that, the more you will understand how it works behind the scenes, why a particular line of code is doing what it's doing. And so what you'll want to do then is start expanding your horizons. And so that's why I suggest for step number 2, get stronger in a particular language. And that's what this series is all about, understanding the why and the background of a lot of the concepts and being able to expand your knowledge beyond just what you're able to copy from another instructor. So the next thing that I'd like to recommend then, step 3, is to actually go and build something. Build it for your brother-in-law, build it for a friend, build it for free for a business. Whatever you do, build something. Make yourself have an end goal. Design it out on a sheet of paper if you need to, what you want the screens to look like, whether it's a web application or a Windows application, and force yourself to learn the things that you need to learn to build a real application. It'll be horrible, like I say here, it'll be buggy, messy, it'll just be the worst application that you ever write, but it will be the sweetest application you ever write because there is an overwhelming sense of accomplishment whenever you're able to build something. You will have learned a lot after building that first real application and having committed to somebody else that you're going to do it for them. It can be a dangerous proposition, but if you put enough time and effort into it and you have good resources at your fingertips, you should be able to do that. Step 4 then is, after you've built a couple of applications on your own, learn how to better structure your applications. And this is really where the principles of object-oriented programming come in. VisualBasic.net, or Visual Basic, made a huge jump from more of a procedural or modular type of development to an object-oriented, true object-oriented language when .NET came around, and it was a pretty big dramatic switch from Microsoft's standpoint. But there are some benefits in using object-oriented programming and designs in your applications, and so you need to get that concept under your grasp, but you don't need to do it right away. The next thing is that you can, and you should, learn other supporting technologies like HTML, XML, SQL, JavaScript, and so on, especially if you're going to do a lot of web development, because there are a lot of different technologies that all can be combined together into one, and you need to have a pretty good understanding of all of them in order to do anything with the language. One time a friend of a friend asked me what could they do to get started in programming, and so I mistakenly listed off like 8 different things off the top of my head that they would need to know. And all of a sudden I realized, wow, that's a lot of stuff, and I'm sure I discouraged the guy from ever getting into software development, and I certainly don't want to do that. These things take time, and you will learn them as you have the opportunity. Don't feel like you need to understand everything in order to be productive today. Step 5 is that you're probably going to, after reading about object-oriented programming, reading about all these different technologies, maybe all the different tools that are out in the market, you're probably going to be confused for a while. This step should take about a year. It took me about a year or two before I really understood what I was doing, and then back in '97 I started learning about object-oriented programming, and then it took me about a year or two to really grasp what that was all about, and not really having a language because I was primarily a Visual Basic developer. Didn't really have a language through which to express some of the object-oriented ideas that I carried around with me for a couple of years. And so then I would suggest that step 6, try learning object-oriented programming again, because it is so important, vital from this day forward what Microsoft's approach is going to be towards programming languages. As we begin to talk about VisualBasic.net, you may have questions about what you can actually do with this language. Back in previous versions of Visual Basic, pretty much all you could do was build Windows applications. In other words, you're probably viewing your web browser, for example, is a Windows application. Microsoft Word is a Windows application. It's opposed to a web application, which is basically a website that you view through a web browser. But Windows applications can also be business applications that access databases within a local area network. So a lot of businesses will use those. They can build utilities. Those are all considered Windows applications. Actually, you'll want to use the new vernacular called WinForms by Microsoft. So you want to create VB.NET WinForm applications. As we've alluded to, also you can build web applications. In the past, you'd use a subset of Visual Basic called VBScript to build ASP pages, what we now refer to as classic ASP applications. But there was a good deal of functionality there, but you were missing some of the most critical pieces, and they've been added to VB.NET so that you can build event-driven, real applications, web applications using VB.NET. And when we're talking about web applications, Microsoft's new vernacular for that are web forms. Then there's something new called web services, and web services basically allow you to exchange information with other applications within a local area network or across the entire internet using a special kind of XML that's called SOAP, the Simple Object Access Protocol. And the concept there is that you have two applications that run on different systems. Maybe one runs on Windows, the other runs on Macintosh or Unix or Linux or mainframe for that matter, and they need to exchange some information. Maybe it's partnering information, maybe it's ordering information in an automated system. How are we going to exchange information between those two systems? In the past, every time a development team had to come to the table, they had to decide how they were going to exchange the information. But now, as long as both parties can read and or parse XML and write XML and send it over HTTP, which is the Internet Protocol, they can connect to and exchange information very seamlessly with each other. And this is something that's made very easy using Visual Basic.NET or C# for that matter. And they're referred to as ASP.NET Web Services. You can also build Windows services, which was difficult to do with Visual Basic in the past without the use of some third-party control. A Windows service is something that runs behind the scenes that you don't actually see a visual interface for, but it gets kicked off every once in a while and it manages something. And we'll talk about Windows services in a whole series of videos that's yet to come. And then finally, you can also build components, which can be visual. So, for example, you can build your own special calendar control or special tree control that other developers can use within their applications, or you can actually sell them online, or you can give them away, or whatever you want to do with it. Or you can build non-visual components, which usually encapsulate business functionality. So, for example, if there are special calculations or special business rules for a bank or for an insurance company that can be encapsulated in an object. And so you can build these components that then can be used by all types of different applications. They can be used by Windows applications, web services, whatever, but you can build these. They're reusable pieces, almost like Legos, that you can kind of piece together with other software that can use them and display information or edit information that comes from those components. Besides LearnVisualStudio.net, of course, what are some other good resources? That's a question that I get asked very frequently. Well, as the old saying goes, good help is hard to find. It's hard to recommend other websites because a lot of them are geared towards people that have been developing for some time, and they're not always appropriate for the absolute beginner. It's also sometimes hard to recommend books because there's a lot of bad ones out there. So my first recommendation is that you don't spend a lot of money on bad books. If you need one good book to get started, only buy one, and that's VisualBasic.NET Step by Step by a gentleman by the name of Halverson, and it's a Microsoft Press book, which, by the way, just here within the last year, I believe, are producing the best books on the market. And that's my personal opinion. In the past, Q Publishing, Sam's were always good. Rocks has been good in the not-too-distant past, but I think they've all been eclipsed by Microsoft Press. And in particular, there's one package. If you don't already own VisualStudio.net, you should buy the VisualBasic.net Deluxe Learning Edition. It's about $100. It comes with VisualBasic.net, and it comes with the book that's mentioned in the previous bullet, the VB.NET Step by Step by Halverson. Buy that. You get everything in one package. It's what you need to get started. Lots of good examples, 5 CDs worth of information. It's going to be a limited version of Visual Studio, but it'll be enough to get you started for at least only $100. While I say don't spend a lot of money on bad books, don't be afraid to spend money either. I probably spent $20,000 to $30,000 over the last couple of years on books and videos and resources, and you might be saying to yourself, are you crazy? And that's probably the same question my wife asks every time I come home with a new book from Barnes & Noble. But the truth of the matter is that, as the old saying goes, you have to spend money to make money. And this is a dynamic industry. Things change very frequently, and that if you want to be at the forefront of the technology, you're going to need to be able to spend a little bit of cash to buy good resources when they become available. And the caution there is that only buy the books that are good. How do you know if a book is good or not? Look at other recommendations on Amazon.com, or go to the bookstore yourself and look through each of the chapters and determine if it has topics that you'd be interested in. Is the book laid out in a way that's interesting, visually, aesthetically interesting to you? Does it have good code examples? Are the code examples on disk? And have good screenshots. Those are always things that are important to me whenever I go to buy a book, because, as you could tell, I'm a very visual person, so that's important to me. But the most important resource that you can use is the help that comes with VisualStudio.net. There's an old programmer saying, it's actually an acronym, called RTFM, and if you don't know what that stands for, I'm not going to tell you, because it's a saying that would make a sailor blush, and it probably wouldn't be appropriate for me to say right now. But the gist of it is that you should use the tool that Microsoft gave you to learn it. They give you lots of sample code. They give you lots of sample applications. They give you lots of explanation, well-written explanation, on how to do various things within the tool. Now, the reason why people, I believe, are averse to it is because they don't like sitting at their computer screens and reading a manual, or that in some cases, as I'll point out as we go through the series, that it's nonsensical. Sometimes it's so technical that you can't quite understand what concept they're trying to say. While that might be true, you should make every effort to use the help, because it's going to be the most accurate source of information that's available to you. You don't have to pay anything extra to get it, and you can usually find what you're looking for if you do a good search. Now, there's one website that I am going to recommend, but it's generally for developers who've been doing this a little bit longer, not always for newbies, and that would be msdn.microsoft.com. So it's http://msdn for the Microsoft Developers Network, msdn.microsoft.com. And therein they have a video program that they put out every couple of weeks called the MSDN Show. I think they changed the name of it to the .NET Show. And you can watch Robert Hess as he interviews some of the developers from Microsoft on specific features of the tools. I know that they have a whole hour devoted to web services, a whole hour to usability of applications, and you can learn a lot from that resource. So look for the .NET Show on msdn.microsoft.com. As always, if you want to bounce an idea off of me, I'd be more than happy to assist you. It's Scott at LearnVisualStudio.net. If you need any good recommendations. Now, what I would like to suggest, and we're going to look at this in a video about called What Just Went Wrong, is that you need to use all the tools available to you before you go and ask other people for help, because they're busy and they have lots to do too, and stopping down to help you takes away from their valuable time. So one of the best recommendations I think I can make for you is that you do diligence on your part to find the answer to a question before going to somebody else and asking them. But don't be afraid to go to somebody else and ask them. Usually people are very helpful. I'm very helpful. I try to help everybody who comes along, but sometimes the problems require a great amount of time to explain or to research, and so you're going to have to ultimately take responsibility for finding the answers on your own. But if you do need help or want to bounce an idea off or need more recommendations or more of a path on where to go outside of this series of videos, feel free to type in my email address and talk to me at any point in time. So that's pretty much it for this video. It's a little more lengthy than I had first intended, but I think some of the concepts here are things that I haven't seen other resources on the internet address, or even topics in books. And these are the more human side of development and getting started. And I wanted to give you a good dose of encouragement in some of the protocol, how to go about getting started along these lines. So I encourage you to become a developer, So use your time and your money wisely to spend as much time as it takes for success, to get good at your craft, and to be a credit to the title of software developer. So thank you, and hope you enjoyed this video.